but I think it's just a real nice little place for people to live.
It was a wonderful town to grow up in. And I recall there was a sign out coming in from Bernice on the Bernice Highway. It said 2,163 friendly people, and that was the truth. Farmerville has always been a very friendly town.
Yeah. Well, tell us about the Farmerville 125th anniversary celebration.
The 125th anniversary was a really fun time. I remember many of us grew beards, and I don't remember a lot of the festivities. I've forgotten. My father was on that committee, but I've forgotten what he did on that committee. But I remember having a really big dance at the Farmerville High School gymnasium when it was that Saturday night as it was ending. A parade, and Farmerville's a big parade town. Then we had the 150th anniversary 25 years ago. I remember more about that. But I think that in years to come, this one that Ricky Albritton has agreed to be the chairman of, I think that a lot of people are going to have great memories about this.
We used to have such a nice little town, you know. We had, at one point, well, for a long time, we only had one drugstore, and that was the Baughman drugstore.
I think a gentleman by the name of Woody B. Miller was a registered pharmacist, and he owned the business. And my dad and a gentleman named W.C. Tugwell purchased the business from him. I suppose, as well as I remember, Daddy bought W.C. out at some point, and he was the sole owner of the drugstore. And then I went to pharmacy school and came home in '59, and my brother went to pharmacy school and came home in '63, I believe. And many deals have been made right in that drugstore. You just wouldn't believe. Many arguments have started in that drugstore, and some had to go outside from time to time. But it was a great meeting place and gathering place for people around the courthouse and in town, and I enjoyed it immensely. I never even considered going somewhere else to work. I wanted to come home. Married my high school sweetheart, and well, actually almost my junior high sweetheart, and I would not have been happy had I not gone to Louisiana Tech. So I went there a year and a half, and then I transferred to Ole Miss, University of Mississippi, for my pharmacy degree. Miss Marilyn's dad was he just knew so much history. And people would come and visit with him. He would sit in the drugstore a while, lean on his walking cane, and then he'd go back to the courthouse, and he'd sit there a while, and then he'd come back to the drugstore. And then it was always a lot of fun when they had court at the courthouse. The different attorneys from Monroe and Ruston would all come in the drugstore, and they genuinely enjoyed it. It was just, like I said, it was a great meeting place in those early years.
Well, it was the hub of the town, I'm telling you. I might as well say it. And we all loved it.
Yeah.
I would go, everything, my graduation gift from high school came from there, still have it, rose gold watch. You could get anything you wanted there. And then, if you had sore throat, Mr. Baughman would mop your throat with iodine and glycerin.
Literally, you'd stand there and he would doctor you?
Go back to the back, yes. And if you needed medicine badly, you know, if it was something he would get it for you, like even on Sunday, he would see that you. Now, I believe one time he did open for a little bit on Sunday because people, you know, needing their medication. That was the place. Everybody went there. I mean, it was just, and I always said, only if I was the least bit ill, ham, my dad was a great cook, rice, and a malt from the drugstore, and that's all it took for me to get well. It worked every time.
I don't know when Daddy actually started the drugstore. I know it was restarted on January the 20th, 1948. That block burned, and if Monroe had not gotten here when they got here, it took them 5 hours. There was snow and ice everywhere. And it took them about 5 hours to get here from Monroe. But had they not gotten here, I think the hardware would probably have burned too and would have leveled the entire block right in the middle of town. They ran out of water. that morning. It started about 4:30, and they ran out of water, and praise the Lord, Halliburton happened to be here at that time. They had a lot of people working here, and they threw their big pipes in Bayou D'Arbonne and brought water to the town to fight the fire, and that saved the hardware. That and Monroe getting here.
So we had 2 drug stores. We had 2 or 3 what they call 5 and 10 cent stores. You know, we had a fabric shop, which was very nice because I liked to sew, and it was real handy to be able to go. We had a real large hardware store, the Stein Baughman Hardware, and they just had a little of everything. We had a movie theater.
Yes, I remember when, you could take 25, 30 cents and go up there and see a movie and eat popcorn during the whole movie and continued pieces and everything else.
We had several restaurants that were nice. We had a cafeteria. We had a Western Auto. We had a furniture store, and at one time we had 2 furniture stores at the same time.
At Toggers was where we bought nice shoes and boots or things like that.
Just north of where the drugstore was, let's go that way. On our side of the street, you had 3 clothing stores. You had the Western Auto, and then you had, I can't think of his name right now, but you had John Richard Kelly. You had Dub Turnage on the north end of that block. And then you had a big mercantile that would be right across from the bank, from the Origin Bank at this time. And in the next block was where one of the theaters was. And Randy Terrell had a store there, and for a while Ingram Ballard sold furniture there. But I thought that was unique to have 3 clothing stores, all just almost side by side by side. But they all did well, and everything. To the south, you had, of course, Grafton's Variety Store and a barber shop, and on Main Street, and then you had Stein Baughman Hardware, and then there was a couple of service stations. We had 3 or 4 or 5 restaurants: Weaver's Cafeteria, Johnson's Cafe, Alleen's Cafe, and we had a lot of little cafes.
We had either 3 or 4 automobile agencies in town. Let's see, there was Chevrolet, Ford, I believe Pontiac. We had a huge cotton gin right down on the main highway down there.
And down where Bruce Motor is and where Union Chevrolet was when it opened at first. But I can remember the cotton gin, and I can also remember they used to have cattle sales down there, cattle auctions.
We had a big sawmill out on the highway toward Marion. Really, it was just a really nice town, you know. And I think back now, you know, and used to, you'd go to town, especially on a Saturday afternoon, it would just be full of people walking around. A lot of people did their shopping on Saturday. And, you know, we had just several grocery stores and all, and a lot of people just came to see everybody else, you know, sort of a visiting day and all. And I think it's sad we don't have that any longer. Several of the things closed, the sawmill closed, and several of those, but the movie theater, it caught fire. Maybe the fabric shop had closed about that time, but then Walmart came. And you know, so many of the smaller things could not compete. So gradually we just lost all of them, you might say. Until I was 15 years old, I lived at the Tugwell Hotel where my grandparents owned and operated. And of course it was a lot of fun down there, you know. I'm sure when I was little I was probably a terrible thing, you know. But I had a lot of fun there. We had a train that came through here regularly every day from Monroe, and I think it went, well, I don't know, that one probably went further than Huddig, Arkansas. And it had passengers and everything, And during the Depression, there would be a lot of people that rode the train. And they would ride in the empty box cars, and I know a lot of them would get off, and they would walk up to the back door of the hotel and knock on the door and ask for food because they were hungry. They were hunting jobs, just riding over the country, hunting a job someplace. My grandfather had either a Model T or a Model A, I don't remember which one it was. And he would go down to meet the train so that anybody that came in that wanted to stay at the hotel would have a ride up there because it was several blocks down to the depot. And a lot of times I would ride with him down there. You know, felt like I was so big, you know, I was a delegate from the hotel. Actually, it's amazing to think back to how things were then compared to now. The hotel was first built, there were rooms on this side, and it was a private home. It was Mr. and Ms. Hartman. And there were 8 rooms and 1 bath that they built for the transits to stay in. And there were 2 of the rooms that had 3 beds in it. There were 2 of the rooms that had 2 beds in them. And then all the rest of them, I believe, only had 1. And you know, when I think back now, it's just amazing. You know, I, neither one, would go and stay in a room where we would have 1 bed and they would put a stranger in the 2nd bed and another stranger over here in the 3rd bed. And yet, they did that. And people didn't seem to mind, and it just worked beautifully, you know. My granddaddy, he and my grandmother slept in this room. The front room was their bedroom up there. He always hung his hat on a post on the bed. And if somebody came, he went to bed at 9 o'clock every night. Didn't matter if you had company. He said, would y'all please go out till I can undress? And everybody did, and he got in the bed, and everybody came back in. The living room was down on that end of the room, and everybody came back in and sat and visited. If someone came wanting a room and knocked on the door, Granddaddy got up. He slept in a nightshirt. He got up, he put his hat on his head. He did not bother to put pants on. He went out the door, showed them a room, rented the room to them, came back, went back to bed. But it always just tickled me to death. That hat had to go on his head. Didn't matter whether he had pants on or not. The hat had to go on his head. It was lots of fun. There were high stairs on the back going into the backyard. Mama would take the mattresses and lay them on those steps so they could sun and make them fresh and puffy and all. And she'd say, now, Marilyn, don't you get on my mattresses. No, ma'am. She'd get out of sight. They just slid so good. If you got on the top of them, you could slide all the way down and have so much. I got lots of whippings doing that. But I always did it, you know. And she knew I was going to, I feel sure, you know. But they cooked 3 meals a day. They served meals. A lot of the people that worked in town came down, especially to eat the noon meal. And then on weekends, a lot of people came, you know, for Sunday lunch and everything like that. One that stands out in my mind and always has is Huey Long. Of course, he was a big politician, and of course, a lot of people didn't like him. A lot of people thought he was next to God himself, you know. My granddaddy thought he was wonderful. He would come up from Baton Rouge, and he would come to eat the meal down at the hotel. I guess he would come to make a talk or something. I must have been, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years old, something like that. So he would come, and he'd come walking in. He always had on a white suit. I had never seen a man with a white suit before. My daddy and granddaddy and all the men I knew had either gray or black or brown or blue or something, you know, no whites. And that just amazed me that this guy had on this white suit. And I mean, it was white. He would have a little cane hanging over his arm. He didn't need it. He just carried it. And I was just actually fascinated watching him when he would come to eat a meal down there, you know.
Fred Bruce running for governor, that was, you know, that helped Farmerville get some notification. And, you know, that's when they had the sound trucks that go up and down in the neighborhoods, you know, and out, you know, so-and-so's going to be speaking today at 1 o'clock at the courthouse, and you couldn't get through Farmerville. Could not get through Farmerville. would be so many people on Main Street.
Right.
We were so proud of Fred, and he was a great gentleman, he and his brother Harry Jr. And Harry Jr.'s sons still own the Pruce Motor Company down here. Fred did not win. A fellow Ford dealer from North Louisiana going against an accomplished politician with his speech making, etc., and Fred did not come out well in the election. Another gentleman was Mr. Harvey Fields, was quite a character. He was a most astute attorney, and he had his particular ways about him, and he was very smart, very nice to be around. But his son, of course, was T.T. Fields, who was our representative.
And we would always get amused at Mr. Harvey. He was so smart. But he would go out after lunch, get in his car, and he would sit there and he would race the motor and race the motor and race the motor. And then he would drive off. So finally one day somebody said, "Mr. Harvey, why do you sit there and race the motor before you drive off?" He said, "Oh, I am mixing the oil and gas well before I leave." So he did that every time, you know.
That out at Uncle Jeff's house on Edgewood, he had a plantation out there, and Charles Lindbergh had the land out there one time. He ran out of gas in his airplane. They sent to town and got some gasoline put in his airplane, and Charles Lindbergh left. I'm happy to say that I was a part of the watermelon. We had the Miss Union Parish pageant, and then we started the Little Watermelon Festival. Then we combined the two and had the beauty pageant, Miss Watermelon Beauty Pageant, and this will be our 55th year, this next year, of the Watermelon Festival and Beauty Pageant. And it brings a lot of people to town. It's always the last weekend in July, so there are it's a lot of fans going on. In the past, years ago, it was not uncommon at all to see the governor and the lieutenant governor and several senators and representatives, not only from our district but for outlying districts too. It was a really big deal when they opened the airport here. Mr. Cross and his family operated the airport for several years, and let's see, Jerry Farr, Frank Barron, Don Barron, Alvin Allen, Glenn Barron, all flew out there. That was really a big step forward. The police jury and all did a wonderful job in obtaining the airport, and it's been real nice, especially without the railroad, coming through here. And one of the strangest things that ever happened with the JCs, we auctioned off a Shetland pony one time, and we had two men in town. They both sold cars and used cars. They both sold Shetland ponies. Well, we managed to get a Shetland pony, managed to get Jake Long to give us a Shetland pony. And we had the drawing that night on Main Street when we were upstairs, and lo and behold, we drew Metz Tugwell's name, and he was the competitor. And we never gotten that Shetland pony from Jake Long to give to Metz Tugwell. James Peyton Smith was a well-known man throughout the parish, and he was elected state representative at one time. And the Baughman family, as I understand it, moved here from South Carolina, and part of our family was the La Palma family. That was my grandmother was a La Palma, and she met Oscar Baughman here, who was a brother to Jeff Baughman. And we don't want to lose anything about Uncle Jeff. He had one of the first telephones, or the first telephone south of the Mason-Dixon line. Daniel Stein, who was a prominent citizen of Farmerville, and my dad was named after him. He had taken some cotton to St. Louis to the World's Fair, as I understand it, and he traded it to Alexander Graham Bell for 3 telephones. And those were, as far as we know, the first 3 south of the Mason-Dixon line. And he had one at Stein's Bluff on the Corny Bayou, one at Uncle Jeff's house, and one at his D. Stein store in downtown Farmerville.
Dr. Taylor, I think, bought the first automobile.
Okay.
Bought it. I was born in 1922.
Okay.
And I can't remember whether he bought like before then or after then. But, and the next day, I think maybe Dr. Dudley or another doctor bought an automobile. So they bought almost at the same time.
I don't know exactly what year that was, but I remember the first night that we had it in the drugstore, and we sold RCA TVs at that time. And a gentleman's dad that you met here a while back, Dillard Joyner, was an antenna specialist, etc., and worked on TVs. But it was very snowy. It was one channel, and of course it was black and white. And I remember how many people gathered at the drugstore that night for fountain cokes, etc., to watch TV. It was you could hardly see it, but you could hear it. You knew something was going on.
But they had the maneuvers, and they lasted for a pretty good while there, training all those young men. And the troops on horses came. We had a lot of empty lots in town. Where the Gazette office is and the corner, it was empty, and they set up their office there, just out on the open ground, you know. And I think that maybe I was in my first year of college at Tech, and all of us girls were just carried away. Here were all of these nice-looking young men, you know, come to town, and so we just had a real good time flirting with all of them. But there were just a lot of them, and you know, I didn't really know it at the time, but since then I've learned there were several other places that also had the same maneuvers, and eventually they all ended up, after they trained in ended up together having some kind of a mock battle or something other.
My husband was in Merchant Marines. He had his master's license from 39, and he was with, he worked under the Panama flag before we were actually in war in 41. And then his older brother, Jack, who had the gasoline before, oil business before and he went to the service, and he was captured, I believe, the next week after he got there, wasn't in France with the Germans, and had to have surgery. But he came home in 45. He was, and I remember my mother-in-law telling me that they didn't even get the word from the War Department. A friend notified the family before. And I still have that, where they notified my mother-in-law, but a friend had to tell them before. They were. But and then the other brother, who just passed away this year, he was in the Navy. So they all served.
We had a lot of boys out of our class, you know, who went into service, and thankfully we were very fortunate that we only lost one or two of our classmates, and the others, you know, served safely. But we did lose one or two, you know, to the war. We had blackout curtains. We had candles that, I don't remember what they call them. I still have some at home, where when you burned them you could not see the light. And that was the only kind of candles you could burn for light at night.
This is during wartime.
And actually just before the war and during the war, you know, because they were afraid if something came over in a plane, they'd be able to see that there was a town they could bomb or something. But they were taking all kinds of precautions, you know, even then.
That's right.
And
My aunt and uncle had a little store in Monroe, and you could not get candy, you know, Hirsch bars, and he would send a box of 24 to my brother and myself, and then my mother could not eat nuts, and he would send her the plain ones. And then we had the variety, Sanders Variety Store below the bank, and this man that all the young people just loved him, Mr. Bolton Tabor, and he would say, when my friend and I'd be in there, he'd say, well, now, little Abe and little Pat, you wait, and he would slip us Hershey's from out, you know, under the counter. That was one thing that was rationed during the war, and then shoes. And I guess I was rough on shoes because my aunt Monroe would send me you had to have a coupon or something. I don't know how many you were allotted at the time, but she helped a great deal with keeping me shoed. Now I do remember, metal. We had a studio couch, they called it, no springs, and it was not soft. But the metal went to the war.
We saved different things. We saved some kind of lids all the time, and different things like that to help. And I guess that they probably were all put together and then, sent someplace else.
Yeah. Scrap metal.
My first job was in Homer, and I worked for McCalman's. They were brothers, and they ran a bus service from Homer and Haynesville, Athens, all of those little towns. They ran a bus service and carried people to Mendon to work in the shell plant, where they found all of these, all of that powder and stuff, whatever they found not
Just
long
recently,
ago that had been just left there. That's where it was. But there were a lot of people that worked over there. I kept books for them, and they also had a restaurant there, and our office was in the front of the restaurant. Of course, there were 3 different shifts that they carried over there.
Yeah.
I remember when the war was over, our little class of course, we were celebrating and just went up to school to ring the bell, and Howard Hicks was waiting for us. He was the custodian, and he was at 12 o'clock. I said, Howard, and someone went to ring the bell. I think it was Katie Kilpatrick, and he stopped, He said, how did you know we'd be here? He said, I just knew.
Did you graduate from?
Graduated from Union Parish Training School, which was located here in the town of Farmerville.
Okay.
My 8th grade through the senior years. So many of us in my class went on to various colleges. And of course, during that time, it was only, you had to choose Grambling or Southern, who's nearby. I was nearby Grambling, but I chose to go to Southern University. And that's where I completed my post-secondary education. I enjoyed English, being in the Glee club, music. I idolized my music teacher, and she was really, really, really a person who made you want to be like her. She was just kind of sophisticated, and she prim and proper, and everything had to be just so. I took private lessons from her also, and during my senior year, I had a recital, music recital, piano recital. And I enjoyed drama also. We had home economics for the girls, and that's not taught in the schools anymore. But girls need to know how to sew and cook and put a button on a shirt if it falls off or something like that. The guys learned about agriculture, how to plant things and how to harvest things, and how to make crops, and how to take care of the cattle and the swine and things of that sort. So it was good, and I suppose they're going away from that these days. But ag is still, all of our food comes from the agriculture.
Got to eat.
Got to eat. That's right. We had, you had to have your English, your social studies, your history, your math, your home economics. If you were a girl, the boys would be ag, music or drama, or music and drama, if you could fit those 2 in. 1951 is the year I graduated at 16. I enjoyed being on the staff of the first yearbook that Union Parish Training School published. This is Union Parish Training School, UPTS, being Union Parish Training School Memories. Our artist was one of the members of, not of the class, but of the school. who did the drawing, and it was called the treasure chest. And this was done by a 10th grader at the time. I believe his name was Sidney Roberts. Oh, this happened to be a picture of my principal's message. Jesse J.B. Bilberry was our principal.
I just loved Farmerville High School and still do. Well, Union Parish High School it is now. And when we consolidated, we were very fortunate that we got to keep our colors and the mascot.
Mm-hmm.
Farmerville High School is very dear to me.
Yes.
Very dear to me.
Yes.
And we had great teachers. We really did. We had really good teachers, and they all were from right here, you know, in town, and it was just a very peaceful, great place to be.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about some of the changes that you saw. You were in Farmerville for a long time, then you went away for a while, and then you came back. What changes did you see in that time?
In that time, there were quite a number of changes. As far as the government is concerned, I saw that there was a hired African American policeman. And later on, I think in '92, the first black mayor of Farmerville was elected, rather. Mm-hmm. And then there were aldermen or town councilmen of color that was employed, and you know, and street names were given to the streets. And I happen to be a part of the naming of the through my organization of the Eastern Stars, Buddy Rose Chapter number 86. We were we promoted the effort of changing. I think it was East Street that was named, and that part was then named Martin Luther King Drive. Mm-hmm. Some of the organizations and some of the things that I did when I came back, I always wanted to give back to Union Parish, to Farmerville in particular. So I came back to my church that I had left. Went along very active in my church, and joined the Eastern Stars, all of Eastern Stars here, and was very active with that. And I was a member of a sorority, the graduate chapter, before I came back, but I became active in the one that was closest by, and that was Grambling, so that covered this area. And I was involved with that. When the Triad was created, they asked me to be a part of it, and I did. And Triad is an organization that helps older the senior citizens, help their welfare, and it was just a helping hand for medicine, for food. The food bank sent food, and we give out food once a month to the senior citizens who qualified, and would visit the senior, have a telephone call-in service. We would call and check on the ones that were in, and if they needed to go to the doctor and couldn't get the council on agent at the time, we would do it. So it's been a very, very, very worthwhile organization, and I enjoyed every moment that I worked there. Joined the Chamber of Commerce, and through that organization, we had a program where we would go volunteer to go to the classrooms and just help the teacher or give them a break or help do whatever they wanted us to do. Still am active with the Chamber of Commerce and with the Voters League here in town.
Oscar Baughman had a steamboat, and he usually parked it at Forks Ferry, which is at the end of West Bayou Street, where Lakeside Drive starts. Yes, my grandfather was Captain Baughman, as they called him, and a lot of old timers still, a few of them call me Captain. The Rosabee, and the Rosabee was after my granddaddy and grandmother, Oscar Baughman, and his wife Donnie. had a child, and her name was Rosabee, and she passed away at a very, very, very early age, maybe 16 months or 12, 16 months, something like that. And so he named his boat the Rosabee. It was a paddle boat and run basically to New Orleans. However, when Daniel Stein could not sell his cotton or could not get what he thought it was worth or whatever in New Orleans, they went up the Mississippi to St. Louis. But I have some beautiful light fixtures that were on that boat, and I have some serving pieces that was on that boat, and I'm very proud of them. And I have a clock, I think, that was on that boat. But it was a beautiful boat, but it was just a steamboat, you know, with the big paddles on the back.
Sure.
When I finished high school, it wasn't a lake. It was just a stream. It was just...
There was the Little Darbone that came from the west and the Corny that came from the north. And those two bodies of water met at a certain point, as I said, at the end of West Bayou and on the other Lakeview Drive. And when those two bodies of water met, it formed the Darbone.
Right. And then I think it was like 65. I'm not quite sure about the dates. That the 15,000 acre lake, man-made lake, was made, and it has really been a tremendous asset.
As well as I remember, three people come to mind when you mention the lake would be T.T. Fields, Armand Rayburn, and Alvin Green. They were very, very, very instrumental. And of course, Randy Terrell did a lot of the work in the land clearing, etc., etc. But it took years and years to finish that product, and it took years and years for people to come here and to stay. We would have a lot of people to come in on the weekends, but they would buy their groceries where they lived, and they would go home Sunday afternoon. But as the years rolled on by, they began to stay. And we have some wonderful residents on Lake Darbone, and Lake Darbone has been a treasure to us. And really, you say, well, gosh, it should be. It's been here for 60-something years. Yes, it has, but I don't think we've reached our full potential with Lake Darbone yet. There's something new going on all the time, and I think we are in the top 10 white perch lakes in the nation, and we're in the top 20 bass lakes in the nation. So that's something to be very proud of.
Sure.
And it has really been a tremendous asset to Farmerville in many, many ways. You know, as far as recreation is concerned, as far as economics is concerned.
We're on a lot of TV shows from time to time.
Oh, yeah.
Very excited about that, and it is. It's been great to have the lake, a great drawing card.
Things have changed, and I believe that you can do as well, almost as well, in Farmerville as you can anywhere else if you set your mind to it. I think more emphasis and more governmental money should be put into our public schools to make it better.
Well, I think we still have a real nice little town. We don't have a whole lot of industry here, but I think all the people are very nice. I think they're very friendly. I think they're very cooperative with each other and help each other out when they need to and everything. And it would be so nice if more young people could get jobs and stay here, and it could grow and be larger than it is now and have more opportunity here.
I just think that we can continue to grow and glow.